So I'm back in the studio after spending some time painting plein air last week, and I want to now take this lovely little sketch, and it really made me happy to open up my sketchbook and take a look at this. I don't paint exactly what I see when I'm painting plein air. I let the painting guide me just like I do in the studio, and that makes it so much fun. The different factors that come into play when you're plein air painting, the weather and the distractions and the changing light, they all influence how your painting's going to come out. And so freeing yourself to do what the painting says within those limitations is actually really, really fun. And it's helped me to be a little, well, maybe just not to take my plein air painting quite so seriously. Now that I'm back in the studio, I'd love to take this and actually put it on a piece of paper that I could put a frame around, do a studio version of my plein air study. And so we're going to do that today. And I'm not going to go as big as I could. Maybe I'm a little tempted to pull out a half sheet of watercolor paper that's 15 inches by 22 inches. But it's really hard for me to film that with this camera and also show you my painting process, like with my palette and so forth. So we're going to do it a little bit smaller. We're going to do a 1/4 sheet watercolor painting, which is 11 by 15, and just see where it leads us using the information gathering that we did in our plein air painting. This is the information gathering. And I took some photos as well, so I can use those, but I mostly want to cling to this and be inspired and influenced by this image and what my memory tells me that I saw. And by doing that, I add this personal narrative to my painting that my photograph didn't capture. When you start a new painting, we don't want to start thinking about all the little details that make this so fun and vibrant. Rather, we want to kind of take a step back, get a little further away, and look at it as though we were standing quite a distance away from the scene. That way we can kind of blur everything and look at it in terms of the value patterns, get those major shapes in. I also want to kind of look at it with my eyes closed and use my memory to guide me in this early stage. So what I'm going to do, it is going to be nearby, but I'm going to think instead about kind of the overall shapes and colors in the scene. We had the landscape, the sky at the top, that beautiful summer blue color. Down below we had grasses and trees, and the grasses and trees, one thing I like about this time of year is there's almost a pinkish tone to the seed heads of the grasses. So I'm going to want to depict that in my painting. And I will be working then with those undertones of color. Even though there's not a lot of original pink in my image, and partly that's because I was working with the limitations of a travel palette, which didn't have all of the colors I might have chosen were I here in the studio. One pitfall that might happen is if you're working in the studio and you're choosing colors for your painting, because I have so many more colors that I can choose from, it's very easy to change things so much that it loses some of the things that made the original painting so beautiful. If I'm choosing colors that are slightly different, they might be, you know, maybe a little moodier than the original colors, and so then I'm going to have maybe the look of a stormy day because my blue that I chose wasn't so vibrant. So those are things you want to watch for. Just because you have access to your entire palette doesn't mean that every color choice you make is going to give the same mood or be as successful as those ones you chose out of necessity when you're in the studio or when you're out painting with that limited palette. Kind of an interesting little quirk of working plein air, that being forced to have those work within those limitations. So I'm just using a lot of water at this stage to get my sky down. It's quite fluid, and I think that gives that beautiful cloudy day movement that I was hoping for. From here I'm going to use some greens and get a hint of the distant trees, something that blurs in with my background. I like painting almost all the elements of my scene in that first layer, very loosely, very pale, because then those elements blend together in such a way so that they really give this unified feeling. And then over here we have that clump of darker trees. I think we're going to try to capture those as well. Again, choosing greens from my palette. I've got some zoisite, which is a lovely gray-green, and I'm going to add some undersea green as well. And I think a little bit of my sky blue color, just to unify and get that feeling of those darker hues. Keep it simple, reminding myself. So I've got distant trees, I've got that one near tree, and now we're going to think about the pinks of the pinks and greens and yellows of the grasses. And I can work with actually the original greens that I started with and just add slightly different colors to them to make them change slightly through the painting process. You don't need to have 10 different greens in your palette to create greens that work for different areas of your painting. Now I'm really excited to use a color I haven't used in a really long time, and that's this Rhodonite Genuine. And I just had this feeling that this was going to be the color that was going to work for my pink grasses. So we're going to throw it down, and it's coming down a little more vibrant than I expected, but I think it's going to be nice. It's a very thick color from my tube. And I kind of like that. Tilting, I'm going to let it run. And it's a mineral color. Rhodonite is a mineral, so it's got a lot of particles in it. So we should be able to see some of those as it starts to dry. And then we're going to bracket it with some greens along the bottom as well. And let those flow together. And when pink and green flow together, we get a neutral. So that's going to be pretty. And create some nice neutral, quiet space at the bottom of the painting. Now I'm really just taking time to explore in more depth and with more time than I had out on the land. And I need to remember that I don't have to rush. I've got lots of time right now. I'm in the studio. Conditions are a lot more controlled. And the light's pretty consistently the same. The one thing I'm relying on that's not going to last is my memory, but I think it should get us through. And the other thing is I have the luxury of painting this multiple times. So getting these first marks down on paper is just the beginning of this exploratory process. Now, I feel like I need a yellow. So we're going to choose a yellow, and I've been using Mars yellow quite a lot lately. I like this kind of opaque buttery yellow. So we're going to insert that and see if it can play nice with the Rhodonite. I've never used them together before. So I think this should be an interesting exploration. It's that opportunity to learn. And having an opportunity to learn in your painting, doing something new that you haven't done before, means that you also should be, if you're good to yourself, releasing yourself from the expectation to create a perfect painting. And I know I am. So if I can do it, you should be able to do it too. We're going to use a smaller brush. I'm already thinking about grasses and wanting to get that feeling of grass in my scene. And so I'm just experimenting. What happens if I drag some of that Mars yellow down into the Rhodonite? I'm getting these really neat little white marks where the water on my brush is really interacting with the Rhodonite. That's something I didn't know. I haven't used Rhodonite in a long time, but I like that. I can now put these beautiful lines because Rhodonite seems like it watermarks really easily. So that means if I were to spatter on my painting, those little spatters are going to create texture in the Rhodonite Genuine as well. This is making new possibilities for some really exciting things to happen. I'm literally jumping up and down right now because I'm excited about the possibilities. I'm going to have to order more Rhodonite because this is all I have left of my tube. And I'm excited. I want to do things with this beautiful color. While we're thinking about that exciting, beautiful color, we're going to look for some darker values to place as well. And I love doing as much of my painting as I can wet in wet. So I'm going to keep working to put some of those darks in. So that means I get to up the level of detail in my painting from this early stage. Something I liked in the original sketch is how my grasses are moving this way and this way. So I get this beautiful movement in both sides of the painting. So I'm going to try to see if I can't carry that through as a theme and a guide for this painting. A little bit of green spatter. Really good way to add movement to your painting is with spatter. I tap really gently. If you tap really hard, it changes the shape of the spatter that goes down. And you have, of course, less control over where it sprays. And spatter on a wet part of the painting is going to move differently than on a drier part. So those give you opportunities to have some variety in the scene as well. Now, the deal is with this painting, it's really easy to doubt yourself when you start to think about what other people might be seeing when they look at your painting. And that's something I try not to think about, which is hard when you're a teacher and you know that I have not just viewers who might see this in an art gallery, but students who might be looking for inspiration for their next painting. And so I don't want to think about what you might think of this scene or whether or not this is going to turn out to be a good lesson. I just want to be focused on the painting and what it needs in this moment. If I'm able to do that, I'm going to have a successful painting because I will have learned a lot about the painting and about myself, and maybe it will turn into a lesson. It might, it might not. I might decide it just doesn't belong in my catalog of courses and lessons, because I have a better way of teaching that method, or maybe I want to do a version that depicts something else. But because my goal is showing you how I might develop a scene from my original painting, when I come back to the studio, I actually think I'll be showing this to you whether or not the outcome is one that I'm thrilled with. Because these are good things to talk about. What do you do with your plein air sketches? Especially if they're not something that's really turning out in that first outdoor excursion. They are fodder. They are food for future paintings. Even if you don't actually paint directly from that scene, we gain so much when we spend time in observation, time out in nature. Back to the Mars yellow again. I'm just going to be dancing back and forth between the colors I've chosen from the very beginning and trying to get some of that movement of grasses down. So pretty. Also, it's really good to spend time outdoors. My husband, when the kids are home for the summer, every day he comes home, he's like, did the kids spend time outside today? And did I spend time outside? Are we getting our quota of fresh air? And when I've been painting plein air, the answer is always yes. Okay, so some of those lines are a little regimented, which I'm not sure I love. So I have to decide how I'm going to break them up. I'm going to wiggle a little bit of Mars yellow in there to create some to break up those lines and to create a distraction. There's lots of beautiful texture. Actually, now this is getting really pretty. And so I now want to do something similar over here, which will, create that echo effect, rhythm, and pattern in your painting. And it connects the dots for the viewers. So they look at that dark green, those little dark green slashes, they look at this little dark green slash, then they move over to these little dark green slashes, and it guides them right across the painting because those areas share characteristics. It's a kind of a little connect the dots kind of situation. We're going to go back to the rhodonite. I'm going to try to make a little puddle in the cup so I have some moist color to work with. And we're going to create some little flowers. It does look like flowers. It's just a little pinker than I had actually thought And so my plan did actually change a little bit. It's not the muted earthy pink of maybe the grassy seed heads. It's more of that vivid pinky color that is kind of close to fireweed, which is another wildflower we have that grows at this time of year. And I'm not so committed to my idea that I need to stick with the grassy seed heads. I can follow a new idea. I can collaborate. Now, when you're spattering like this, it's actually a really good idea to maybe cover up some of the areas of the painting that don't need spatter, or just be really quick to blot them if you're lazy like me. I don't mind a little spatter on my sky. And I'm also going to go back in. Let's make our big bush happen here. So we've got a big shrubby tree, and I know what variety of tree it is, but I don't think it matters, so I'm not obsessing about that. I want a large mass of green, and I want to give it a nice dark value impact, and I want it to feel like a shrub. That's my main criteria for whether or not my shrub is successful. I'm going to put a little bit of that blue in there, again echoing the sky color, cooling it off a little bit. And when you're working with a little brush like this one, it's got a beautiful fine point that gives us our beautiful grasses, but it also has this gorgeous swoosh on when you use it sideways, and that's what's going to give our bushes some really good shape here. And I threw a little spatter down again. It's maybe some leaves blowing. I needed a little more looseness and fluidity. I'm continually fighting my tendency. There's stuff about that I'm really struggling with. I'm always fighting my tendency to get too controlled in my paintings. And the best way to fight that tendency is to make your painting do something unexpected. I'm actually going to choose, I'm going to put some yellow in here right now. Some Nicolazo yellow, because I've got this dark bush that just feels a little too dark. And if I put that yellow in, it's got this beautiful swoosh to it that's going to create, push against the green that was taking over and create some lighter value effects. And I'm going to trust myself that I'm doing the strategy that's going to work. Try not to fuss with it too much. I don't know, I just feel like some blue right here seems like the right thing to do. There are splatters of blue in my plein air sketch, and there's some of the best parts of the reference image. So we trust it. We let it provide some guidelines for the choices we make now. Tilting, letting movement happen inside of my tree. I'm also going to lift a little bit, I think, with the thirsty brush. By lifting out some moisture, I might get a little more interesting. I don't know. Just struggling with it. It doesn't trust me. Place that yellow. The yellow pushed the darker colors away, kind of towards the edges. Now I'm going to put some darker marks in the tree itself. Right here there's a nice dark shape, and we're going to just move it down like so, and then up a little bit, and down a little bit. Over a little bit. okay, that's sort of working. I feel the movement. There's a bit of flow, bit of drama. I think we can let that be. The blues that I've placed here are a little blotchy. I'm okay with that. I think we're just gonna drag some grassy shapes out from there. Maybe a little bit of Mars yellow. Oh, the Mars yellow and that blue, I think it's a manganese blue. They look really nice together. Whenever I start to feel like I'm fighting for control, I tend to try to do something to just completely take control right out of my hands. It feels like a counterintuitive thing to say, but it's that struggle for control that can really take away the freshness and authenticity in my painting. That feeling of risk and excitement, I think they're a little addictive. Bigger drops, more water on my brush. Okay, I've been working at this for a little while, and whenever the more time I spend on a painting, the more likely I am to tighten up and get a stiff, orchestrated look and appearance. I don't want that. So now is a really good time to stop, and I'm probably going to take a break from this painting for a while. I feel as though there are so many elements that I like that it's highly possible that this painting is finished, and I need time to be able to tell if it's finished or not, because my emotions sometimes say, no, you got to do more. That was too easy, or that was too fun. You got to try harder. And that is, kind of death to paintings. So letting it dry, coming back to see it with fresh eyes, letting it be its own thing. It does not have to be this painting, although elements from this painting definitely work in the context of this one. And there might even be things that I look at and think, well, what if I put those little grassy bits into here somehow? And I might try that. But whatever I do, my plan is to continue this painting in the spirit in which I started it, and ideally the spirit in which the original plein air painting was painted. When I go into it with emotion that mirrors what was already going into the painting, I'm much more likely to see a successful and unified painting through the painting process. Your plein air studies can powerfully influence your studio works and make them just that much more vibrant and real and authentic for that time spent working out some of these problems in nature.